the last question I have for you, and it's not something that's on here, but something I've thought about in the past. So it'll be a scenario, and so I'll run it out, and then you can tell me whatever you think about it. So through this whole conversation, we've talked about the ins and outs of tariffs, where they're coming from, the history of tariffs, how they affect people, the different things that tariffs do. I think, I really appreciate your time and you coming on here. You did a, amazing job of breaking aspects that I didn't even know tariffs affected or had a part in at all. I guess something that's always I question for a while is, and I'm going to put these in as simplest terms, I guess, as I can. And I think you might have addressed some of these in past, but I want to just bring it up as a whole is that if I'm looking at buying a product and it's $1.25 to buy the American made product, or it's $1 to buy the, imported product that was created in China. Now, if we put a 30% tariff on the one from China, now it's $1.30. Well, my cheapest option now is the American made product. So I'm buying American made, but now I'm still paying 25 cents more than the original dollar that I was paying for the Chinese created product. In turn, the tariff has obviously increased the price of the product. And now the domestic product is the one I'm going with, which is a great, but I'm also paying 25 cents more per product. On this analogy, am I far off on how that happens? Because to me, it seems like no matter what we do with tariffs and the way and the cost it takes to produce product within the United States that we've seen or we've been told, no matter what the outcome is here, we're going to end up paying higher prices in the end. Is that a reasonable conclusion or am I being too simplistic with it? It's just something that you look at the simple way of doing math and it's not mathing. So am I off on my thinking here?
No, no, you're right on. And again, sort of two different ways to look at the impact. Impact on the individual company and the individual product is actually pretty substantial, right? That's a big shock. The prices are going up. They're going to have to charge more. It affects their competitiveness, and we see that impact. What a lot of people will try to measure, though, is the macroeconomic impact of inflation overall. So in 2018 and 2019, when you look at, everything that shook out, when you look at the tariff impacts of products that were being inbounded, but then you offset that with like a reduction in energy prices and reductions elsewhere in transportation costs and other things, the net impact was only a 0.2% increase in inflation. So we went from 1.7% to 1.9%, and everyone kind of throws their hands up and says tariffs meant nothing. But I worked with a company who does like medical syringes, and when they look at their plastics costs going up, it was significant for them. They had to go to all their clients and they had to boost the price of those syringes by a significant amount. And all of a sudden, competitors that had not been a consideration for those customers, suddenly those competitors kind of worked their way back into the mix and into the conversation. And so that company was forced to change. All of a sudden they had to go to some of the value added items and try to get those customers away from thinking about just cost, and there was a big negotiation that took place and they had to change their market strategy to compensate for that. And that's what we're going to see for individuals. So some of the electrical distributors and electrical contractors and material suppliers, it's going to feel, I'm not going to say catastrophic. It's going to feel painful to them because they are going to have to adjust. They're going to have to rethink how they compete. They're going to have to rethink their supply chains a little bit or not. They may say, I'm going to pay the tariff, but I'm going to go put the screws to my transportation provider and the guy making the packaging for the boxes and all those other folks to try and get my total landed costs down. And they'll see cheaper transportation prices if the price of diesel comes down. And, so you gotta, again, look at that net effective tariff rate once they see what that effect is to really understand what the risk is. And again, at a macroeconomic level, we might not see that big an impact just because, it's being offset by other factors. I mean, energy's coming down, cost of wages are coming down, so all those other factors are really offset it at a macro level. But again, yeah, 25% increase in tariffs to an individual company on an individual product who's single sourcing coming out of China or Mexico, yeah, this is terrible for them. I mean, they feel terrible about it, right? They're they're in their war room trying to figure out what they're going to do, and that's what we see on the stock market right now. That's the stock market trying to adjust to that thought of what happens to a key equity if all of a sudden their profitability goes down by 5%. And that's what everyone's trying to work their way through right now and trying to adjust to.
So I guess with your response, the way I was looking at it was a very, simplistic way of doing the math. 30% tariff means on a dollar product, 30 cents. So it's a dollar 30. But as you're putting it there, and I think we've discussed this over the last however long we've been talking at this point, but there is other factors. So if a manufacturer is bringing it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to see a jump that goes to a dollar 30 so that the domestically made product at dollar 25 is now the cheapest. It could be a 30% tariff, but in the end, if the price of energy is starting to go down, or they talk to their corrugated box guy and he is able to do something for them, or they find savings throughout in different ways, they can offset the initial cost from the tariff and bring their products still to market at a dollar 15, which is still 10% or 10 cents, excuse me, cheaper than what that domestic gross product is. But at least it's bringing that up closer to it. So the price is going up still, but not as dramatically as what we're seeing into that one-to-one correlation of percentage to overall cost.
Yeah, and as I travel around the country, the 2 questions I get are, "Okay, if I'm gonna watch one metric as I'm running my company, what am I watching?" And that's why I keep going back to total landed cost or the net effective tariff rate. Those 2 things are gonna dictate sourcing decisions, And that's overly simplistic, to be honest with you. It's real simple stuff, but the calculation of those 2 things can be very complex, and
Mhm.
companies really have to watch. One more just example, and this will really throw you off, but with interest rates so high, as I go borrow money, short-term money, the cost of that capital is way up right now, right? So if I load up a warehouse full of inventory, I've got that inventory carrying cost I've got to worry about. And if I'm borrowing money, if I didn't go pay cash for those items, if I'm borrowing money to go buy those items, suddenly I've got the cost of capital on top of that. So we saw a surge in air cargo transportation at the end of last year. That's like the most expensive transportation you can possibly buy. And it was off the charts. Global prices for air cargo were 14 to 15% year over year, super high. And the reason why was because companies had calculated that it was cheaper for them to pay that higher cost of transportation and move a single pallet of items from a foreign sourcing market into the United States and work through that pallet than it was to try and buy a whole container full, bring it in, warehouse it, pay the cost of capital, and then finally portion it out over a period of time. It's just interesting. I think one of the things when you and I do this again a year from now, and we kinda do, like, rehash this, from,
Yeah.
like, "What did we say then? Here's what happened." We're gonna be looking back, and we're gonna see this as a defining moment for a lot of companies and the way they go to market and their competitive strategy.
Yeah.
And the decisions that they made on how they source, how they handle the tariff situation, a lot of that's gonna be a defining moment for a lot of people, and, I don't think you can underestimate it. I don't think we're blowing it out of proportion,
Mhm.
you know?
So maybe not as much right now, the moment for how much we're getting into the tariffs, but what our overall strategy is and how we can adjust for the future, not just for the tariffs, but overall, like how our business can grow from 2025 moving forwards, knowing that we're never going to probably be back in the same world that we were before. And even if we do go back, say, to how things were 3 years ago, they're already set in place to be able to take on any issue that's going to be happening moving forwards. So more of a strategy shift than the ones and twos and ones and zeros that they may be looking at is what should be consideration at this time.
Yeah, I think you just captured it perfectly, and I haven't heard it put that way before, and I like it. It's just really that these tariffs are creating that short-term urgency to force you to make a better long-term strategic decision based on other things. Yeah, so, way to go. That was awesome. Yeah.
Well, Keith, let's end it at that point then, because I don't really have much for you. And I like going out in the high, and getting your praise on that works well for me. But we truly appreciate you coming on today, taking the time to walk through all these topics. I mean, we've I think spanned everything we can. I think we're going to be breaking out, and we have, because this is going to be in the future, broken out these episodes into bite sizes. But ending on today's episode, I think we really were able to cover a lot of things, and I hope that our listeners are able to pull value from this and an understanding moving forwards. And thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming on.
Well, absolutely, and I joked about it being a year from now, but, I'm here, you know where I'm at now, and, if they find value out of this, then we can talk about all kinds of topics. So,
Thank you,
All
Keith.
right, sounds good. Well, thank you for joining us throughout this whole series, and we'll catch up with you next time. Take care.
okay.